Angel Reese warming up, shooting threes before the game. Angel Reese is shooting 40% on layups and is wasting time practicing bricking threes. SMH, get on some mic and drills, LMAO. Now my question is, what is with this leg kick? What is with this leg kick? Are we in a batter's box waiting for a pitch to come down the plate and we're loading up? Angel Reese chokes, shrinks, crumbles under the spotlight against the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark, in her professional career, has now lost one time against Angel Reese. In fact, ever since Angel Reese followed Caitlin Clark around in that national championship game, doing the John Cena you can see.
The basketball world held its breath. What was supposed to be a coronation turned into a public unraveling. Angel Reese walked into State Farm Arena thinking this would be her moment to finally step out of Caitlin Clark's shadow. Instead, what unfolded over the next 2 hours would expose a harsh truth that nobody wanted to say out loud. And later, she'd admit something that shocked everyone watching. This wasn't just another WNBA game. This was the moment where preparation meets pressure, where hype collides with reality, and where one player's confidence completely shattered on national television. The Indiana Fever came prepared. The Atlanta Dream came hoping. And when the final buzzer sounded, everyone understood something fundamental had shifted. Angel Reese's post-game admission would later confirm what the tape already showed us. Sometimes the biggest reveal isn't what happens on the court, it's what a player says when they can't hide behind the game anymore. To understand what happened in this game, you first have to understand what's happening in the entire WNBA right now. The economic transformation is real, and it's happening at a speed that's almost hard to process. Arenas that used to operate with thousands of empty seats are now completely sold out. Not occasionally, consistently. The Indiana Fever games have become appointment television. The Atlanta Dream games have become events. Teams are hiring additional security just to handle the overflow crowds. Television networks are reshuffling their entire broadcast schedules to accommodate women's basketball. Ratings that would have been considered phenomenal 5 years ago are now considered baseline. Some broadcasts are pulling numbers that rival primetime television slots. The financial trajectory is staggering. Sponsorship deals are getting larger. Merchandise is flying off shelves. Investment groups are suddenly interested in owning WNBA franchises. The whole ecosystem has shifted, and the money is following. But here's the critical part that people keep missing when they talk about the WNBA's growth. Almost all of that expansion, all of that money, all of that attention traces back to one undeniable force. Caitlin Clark changed the game the moment she stepped into the WNBA. Not because she's the only talented player in the league. There are plenty of incredibly talented players, but Clark represents something different. She represents a generational talent arriving at exactly the right moment, with the right skill set and the right level of marketability. Every single time she touches the court, marketing departments go into overdrive. Teams literally plan their entire schedules around when they're facing her. Networks structure their broadcast calendars to ensure they get Indiana Fever games in primetime slots. Corporate sponsors are willing to pay premium rates because they know Clark brings viewership. The economic gravity of her presence is reshaping how franchises operate. Smaller market teams are suddenly viable because they know they can schedule games against Indiana and move tickets. Arena management is planning stadium expansions because they need the capacity. The business side of basketball has fundamentally changed because one player arrived in the league and immediately justified the hype in ways that most athletes never do. But there's a critical distinction that most people don't talk about enough. There's a massive, almost unbridgeable difference between wanting the spotlight and being able to survive it once it arrives. The spotlight in professional basketball isn't a gentle thing. It doesn't care about your feelings or your confidence. It demands excellence. It exposes weakness. It makes every mistake visible to millions of people. It creates pressure that's almost impossible to describe unless you've actually experienced it. Angel Reese knew this intellectually. She prepared for this moment knowing that facing Clark on the stage would define her career narrative, or at least she thought she had prepared for it. She understood that she needed to prove herself. She understood that the narrative demanded a showdown. She understood that this was the moment to finally silence the people who said she belonged in Clark's shadow. So she came in with a game plan. She had a strategy. She had confidence. What she didn't have was the mental fortitude to execute when everything fell apart. What makes this particular game so fascinating is that it perfectly encapsulates the new reality of the WNBA. The economics have created a new standard. The spotlight has become more intense. The expectations are higher than they've ever been. Teams can't just show up anymore. They have to be prepared. They have to understand strategy at an elite level. They have to have players who can handle pressure. The Indiana Fever checked all of those boxes. They came in with a clear defensive scheme. They understood exactly what Atlanta was trying to do before the game even started. They had a coach who could make adjustments in real time. And they had Caitlin Clark, a player who thrives under pressure instead of shrinking from it. The Atlanta Dream came in hoping. They came in with potential. They came in with Angel Reese, who had all the talent in the world. But hoping isn't a game plan. Potential isn't execution. Talent doesn't matter if you can't translate it into actual performance. By the time the game was 30 minutes in, it was clear that the Fever were operating on a completely different level. They weren't just winning. They were exposing the gap between preparation and improvisation, between execution and effort, between a team that was ready for the moment and a team that was still figuring things out. When you watch the film from warm-ups before this game, something immediately feels off. There's an uneasiness to it. Angel Reese is out there on the court drilling corner three-pointers with intense focus and deliberate repetition. She's working on her perimeter game, taking shot after shot from distance, going through a routine that suggests she's made a significant adjustment to her offensive arsenal. The coaching staff is overseeing this work. The ball boy is feeding her passes. Everything looks professional and organized. And yet, pause on this for a second and let it sink in. This is a player who's shooting around 40% on basic layups. Layups, the most fundamental, most basic shot in all of basketball. The shot that's supposed to be automatic. The shot that young players learn in their first week of organized basketball. She's missing 4 out of every 10 attempts from 2 feet away. She's struggling with the basics. And yet, with the biggest game of her professional career minutes away, with the spotlight about to turn on at full intensity, she's spending her mental energy and physical repetitions on three-point range. This is a strategic choice. This is a decision made by her coaching staff. But it's a choice that raises serious questions about preparation and priorities. The shooting form itself adds another layer to the concern. There's this awkward leg kick that happens every time she releases the ball. It's an unnatural mechanical motion. It's the kind of thing that looks like she's standing in a batter's box waiting for a pitch to come down the plate rather than a basketball player getting ready to shoot. Her feet are doing something weird. Her lower body is moving in a way that disrupts her shooting mechanics. It's not smooth. It's not fluid. It looks forced and uncomfortable. For a player trying to become more comfortable from 3, that's exactly the opposite of what you want. You want repetition that builds confidence through familiarity. You want a motion that feels natural and repeatable. You want to be training muscle memory into your body. Instead, what we're seeing is a motion that looks fundamentally flawed, mechanically unstable, and something that clearly wasn't ingrained into her shot through thousands of previous repetitions. This is where you start to understand what Indiana's coaching staff was thinking. They were watching these warm-ups. They had scouts studying Atlanta's preparation. They were seeing exactly what Atlanta was trying to do. And they were building their entire defensive strategy around exploiting these weaknesses. This is elite-level coaching. This is understanding your opponent so thoroughly that you can anticipate their approach before the game even tips off. Indiana knew that Atlanta wanted to space the floor. They knew Atlanta was trying to get Reese to shoot threes. They knew that Reese wasn't comfortable with that role yet, but that the Dream were going to try to force it anyway. So they built a game plan specifically designed to exploit that mismatch. The Fever came out with a masterclass in defensive psychology. They basically dared Atlanta to beat them from outside. They packed the paint. They suffocated the rim. They created a paint-heavy defense that practically invited perimeter players to launch threes. It's the kind of scheme that only works if you have the discipline to execute it properly. You can't give up easy layups. You can't break formation. You have to trust your system. And Indiana executed it flawlessly. They turned the court into a minefield of bad decisions, and Atlanta walked right into every single trap. The difference between what you prepare for in practice and what actually happens when the game starts is sometimes brutal and unforgiving. It was brutally unforgiving here. This is where the gap between two different approaches to the game became visible. Atlanta was thinking about potential. They were thinking about what Reese could become, what her game could look like if she expanded her range. They were thinking about the future version of this player. Indiana was thinking about what Reese actually was right now, what her current weaknesses were, and how to exploit those weaknesses with precision. One team was playing chess. The other was playing checkers. The Indiana Fever entered this game with a game plan that was as simple as it was brilliant. They had watched tape. They had studied Atlanta's tendencies. They had identified exactly what the Dream wanted to accomplish offensively. And then they built a defensive scheme that was specifically designed to make everything Atlanta wanted to do as difficult as possible. This is what separates good teams from great teams. It's the difference between showing up and executing. It's the difference between hoping your players are better than their players and actually having a plan to expose their weaknesses. The Fever's strategy was fundamentally built on one principle: dare Atlanta to beat you from outside. Pack the paint. Make the interior impenetrable. Force the Dream into uncomfortable perimeter shots. This works beautifully when you have the personnel to execute it and the discipline to stick with it. Indiana had both. They had defenders who were willing to play physical defense on the perimeter. They had a center in Aaliyah Boston who was commanding enough in the paint that Atlanta's offensive attacks on the rim became incredibly difficult. They had a coaching staff that believed in the system enough to ride it out even when Atlanta was attempting to respond. The Atlanta Dream, meanwhile, was operating in a state of offensive chaos. There was no clear system. There was no established game flow. They were reacting instead of acting. They were hoping to get lucky instead of executing a plan. They were trying to freelance their way to success instead of running an offense that everyone understood and believed in. The difference between these two approaches became painfully obvious within the first quarter. The Fever were organized. They were flowing. They were connected. Every possession had a purpose. Every defensive set was designed to push Atlanta towards specific outcomes. Atlanta, by contrast, looked like a team trying to solve a puzzle while the puzzle kept changing shapes. This is where Caitlin Clark's presence becomes crucial. She wasn't just playing basketball. She was running the offense. She was making reads. She was understanding where the weak points in Atlanta's defense were forming and exploiting them. She was the quarterback, the general, the person who understood how to make Indiana's system work at maximum efficiency. Meanwhile, Angel Reese was trying to impose her will individually. She was trying to force things. She was trying to make plays happen through sheer determination instead of understanding how she fit into a larger system. One approach leads to consistent, repeatable success. The other leads to frustration. The paint defense that Indiana deployed was particularly devastating for Atlanta. By loading up in the paint, the Fever essentially said to Reese, "You're not going to beat us with layups and close-range finishes. If you want to hurt us, you're going to have to beat us from distance." This is a psychological play as much as it's a physical one. It's saying, "We don't respect your three-point shot enough to guard it closely." It's saying, "We're comfortable with you shooting threes." It's saying, "We've watched the tape, we know you're not comfortable from distance, and we're betting our entire defensive scheme on the fact that you won't make enough of them to beat us." It's a calculated risk, but it's a risk based on actual data, actual film study, and actual knowledge of what Reese's shooting percentages were. The Atlanta Dream's response to this defensive scheme was essentially non-existent. They didn't adjust. They didn't counter. They didn't seem to have alternative offensive approaches ready to go. Instead, they kept trying the same things over and over again, expecting different results. They kept attacking the paint and running into Boston's defensive presence. They kept settling for threes because the perimeter was open, not because that was where their offense was supposed to go. They were reactionary. They were disorganized. They looked like a team that had a game plan on a whiteboard somewhere but couldn't execute it under actual game conditions. By halftime, it was already decided. The Fever had established complete control. They weren't just winning. They had imposed their will on the game. They had forced Atlanta to play the game Indiana wanted to play instead of the game Atlanta wanted to play. This is the hallmark of great coaching. This is what separates championship teams from teams that look good on paper but can't translate that into actual results. There are moments in sports that define everything that comes after them. There are moments that, when you watch them, you immediately know something has shifted. Early in this game, there's one of those moments. It's a single possession that, in the span of maybe 5 seconds, tells you everything you need to know about the trajectory of the entire game. It's Angel Reese taking a three-pointer, missing it badly, and in that moment, you understand that this isn't going to be her night. Jordan Canada brings the ball up the floor and finds Reese on the wing. She's got space. Real space. Miesha Hins Allen is standing so far away from her that she's practically in the stands. There's nobody within arm's reach. This is the moment. This is when Reese can make a statement. This is when she can prove that all that three-point work in warm-ups wasn't for nothing. She's got a wide-open look. The defense is practically begging her to shoot, and she does. She catches the ball, sets her feet, and fires, but something's terribly wrong. The second the ball leaves her hands, you know it's not going in. There's no arc, there's no rotation. The ball is flying through the air like a wounded bird. It's an airball, complete and utter nothing. She even tried to use body English on it after it left her fingers, trying to steer the ball toward the hoop through sheer will. It didn't work. The ball hit nothing but air. That single possession drained the life out of Atlanta's offense. It wasn't just a miss. Everybody misses shots. It was the manner of the miss. It was the confidence that evaporated in an instant. It was the realization that the work in warm-ups, the preparation, the mental rehearsal hadn't translated into actual execution. For Reese, for her teammates, for everyone watching, it was a statement, but not the kind of statement she wanted to make. It was a statement that said, "I'm not ready for this moment." It was a statement that the pressure had gotten to her before the game had really even started. What happened next is where the gap between these two teams became impossible to ignore. The second that ball hit nothing but air, the Indiana Fever immediately pushed pace. They didn't celebrate. They didn't showboat. They didn't even acknowledge the miss. They just moved. Raven Johnson brings the ball up the floor with purpose and intention. Atlanta is supposed to get organized defensively. They're supposed to set their feet and prepare for a Fever offensive set. But there's absolutely no organized resistance from the Dream. It's chaos. Ryan Howard straight up gives up on the play. She stops moving. She stops fighting. She just quits. She's walking, not sprinting. She's not even pretending to try. When you give Caitlin Clark space in transition, especially when you're not even trying, it's over. The game's over. Clark casually pulls up from distance and drains it. Swish, nothing but net. In 10 seconds, you've gone from an airball at one end to effortless execution at the other. That's not luck. That's not bad bounces. That's not Atlanta being slightly outplayed. That's the difference between a team ready for the moment and a team that had completely crumbled under the pressure. That's the difference between a player who's played in moments like this 1,000 times and a player who is still figuring out how to handle the intensity. That sequence, more than any other single moment in the game, told the story of what was about to happen. The psychological impact of that sequence cannot be overstated. For Atlanta, it's demoralizing. Your star player just missed badly when it mattered. Your offense just stalled. Your defense just got beaten in transition by the opposing star player. For Indiana, it's validating. The game plan is working. The defense is sound. The offense is executing. Everything they prepared for is coming to fruition. Momentum is a real thing in basketball. It's not just a concept. It's an actual force that shifts games. And in that 10-second sequence, the momentum completely shifted toward Indiana. From that point forward, every possession seemed to confirm what that sequence had suggested. Atlanta was going to struggle. Indiana was going to dominate. Reese was going to battle the pressure. Clark was going to thrive under it. The Fever had found the formula, and the Dream didn't have an answer. As the game wore on and the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore, something shifted in Angel Reese's approach. The frustration started building. You could see it in her body language. You could see it in how aggressively she was moving. You could see it in the way she was attacking the basket with increasing desperation. She knew the game was slipping away. She knew her performance wasn't matching the moment. She knew that she needed to do something, anything, to impact the game and change the trajectory. So instead of adjusting her approach, instead of accepting what the defense was giving her, instead of working within the system that her team was trying to establish, she started forcing things. Reese's game is supposed to be built on a specific identity. She's a dominant presence around the rim. She's a rebounder. She's physical. She's relentless. The broadcast team loves showing her running the floor, crashing the boards, being aggressive on the glass. She's supposed to be the kind of player who punishes teams with her interior presence. She's supposed to be the kind of player who makes teams regret playing small lineups. But running the floor only matters if you can actually finish the plays. Throughout this game, she kept finding herself matched up against smaller defenders. Sophie Cunningham is nearly 3 inches shorter. Other Atlanta opponents were similarly disadvantaged in terms of physical matchups. And yet, despite those advantages, despite having better athletes across from her, Reese still couldn't consistently convert easy finishes. Layups were rimming out. Point-blank attempts were getting rejected. The finishing touch that's supposed to be automatic just wasn't there. The frustration boiled over in ways that became increasingly visible. Instead of adjusting, instead of taking what the defense was giving her, she started making questionable decisions. Blatant moving screens that somehow the referees missed. These weren't subtle. These were obvious infractions. These were screens where you could see her shifting her feet, creating illegal contact, and opening up space for her teammates. She was pulling down Aaliyah Boston's arm on jump balls, trying to gain whatever small advantage she could find. She was getting increasingly physical in ways that were starting to border on unsportsmanlike. Desperation is visible on a basketball court. Everyone watching could see it. Her teammates could see it. The officials could see it. The entire arena could feel the desperation radiating off her. There's a moment in the second half where Reese pats one of the Indiana defenders on the head. It's not a friendly tap. It's a dismissive gesture. It's the kind of thing you do when you're frustrated, when you're losing control of your emotions, when you're trying to get under someone's skin because you're not winning the battle on the court. It's a small thing, but it's revealing. It shows a player who's mentally checked out from the game itself and is now just trying to disrupt opponents because she can't beat them fairly. This is what pressure does to players who aren't ready for it. It exposes the gaps in their mental toughness. It reveals who can stay composed when things aren't going their way and who falls apart. It shows who can adjust and who can only execute when things are going according to plan. Reese was exposed as a player who struggles when her first options aren't available, when her comfort zone is being eliminated, when the game isn't following the script she had written in her mind. The rules violations, the questionable tactics, the increasingly desperate play, it was all a manifestation of a player who was losing the mental battle. She wasn't playing to win. She was playing to not lose, and there's a critical difference between those two approaches. One is proactive, one is reactive, one leads to confident execution, one leads to frustrated desperation. Indiana's response to all of this was almost boring in its consistency. They didn't break. They didn't waver. They didn't get drawn into the physical nature of Reese's play. They responded with disciplined, aggressive defense. They didn't need to beat her with physicality. They just needed to execute their game plan, make their shots, and let the system work, which is exactly what they did. Every time Reese tried to force her way to the basket, Aaliyah Boston was there. Every time she tried to create contact, the officials weren't calling it. Every time she tried to impose her will, Indiana simply overwhelmed her with better preparation and better execution. There's a sequence late in this game that perfectly encapsulates everything that had happened up to that point. It's a single possession that lasts maybe 10 seconds, but tells the entire story of why Indiana won and why Atlanta lost. It's the kind of sequence that, when you watch it, you understand exactly what separates a championship-caliber team from a team that's still trying to figure things out. Angel Reese has the ball in her hands. She's positioned near the elbow. She's trying to create something. She's trying to force her way to the basket. She's trying to impose her will on the game one more time. You can feel the desperation in her movement. You can sense that she knows this isn't working, but she's committed to trying anyway. She makes her move. She drives. She's determined. She's physical. She's doing everything she can to get to the rim and finish. And then Aaliyah Boston appears. Boston doesn't hesitate. Boston doesn't give an inch. Boston plants herself and prepares for impact. Reese goes up. She's trying to finish through Boston's defense. She's trying to will the ball into the basket. And then Boston extends her arm. It's a clean block, textbook rejection. Boston erases the shot with authority. Reese's attempt never had a chance. The ball is swatted back with force. It's the kind of block that sends a message. It says, "You're not getting to the rim tonight." It says, "My paint is protected." It says, "I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and I'm positioned better than you." But the sequence doesn't end there. That's only the beginning. Because before Atlanta can even process what just happened, before Reese can react to the rejection, before the Dream can organize themselves defensively, Caitlin Clark has already moved. She's already looking. She's already identifying where the loose ball is going to end up. She's already positioning herself to be the first one there. And she is. She grabs the rebound. Clean possession. No contested rebound. Just Clark securing the ball and immediately understanding what's about to happen next. The floor is open. Indiana is in transition. Atlanta's defense is scattered. The Dream have too many players still in their offensive sets, still trying to figure out what happened with the block. They're not set defensively. They're not ready. They're not organized. Clark sees this immediately. This is exactly the kind of situation where elite guards thrive. This is the kind of moment where a generational talent makes a play that changes games. Clark surveys the floor. She's looking down floor. Indiana's guards are sprinting. Kelsey Mitchell is already running. The spacing is perfect. The angles are set, and then Clark throws the pass. It's not a lazy outlet. It's not a casual advancement. It's a full court dime. It's a laser. It's perfect. Mitchell catches it in stride. She barely breaks her running motion to secure the ball, and then she's finishing. Easy layup, uncontested, no defense anywhere near her. Bucket, 3 seconds, 1 possession. 1 block, 1 rebound, 1 perfect pass, and 1 easy bucket. It's the absolute definition of history stolen by the Indiana Fever. They took Atlanta's energy, absorbed their physical play, and countered with lethal precision. They took an offensive possession that Atlanta initiated and turned it into a demoralizing bucket for themselves. They went from defense to offense to scores in a way that looked almost effortless. But there's nothing effortless about it when you understand what's actually happening. Boston's block wasn't luck. That was positioning. That was preparation. That was understanding where Reese was going to attack and being ready for it. Clark's transition recognition wasn't luck. That was basketball intelligence. That was seeing the floor in real time and understanding how to exploit what the defense wasn't prepared for. Mitchell's finishing wasn't luck. That was just a player in motion finishing the play that was set up for her. For Atlanta, this sequence was soul-crushing. For Indiana, it was validating. It proved everything they had prepared for. It showed that their system was working. It demonstrated that when they execute, they're nearly unstoppable. And it showed that Angel Reese, despite her talent, despite her potential, wasn't ready to overcome a team that was this prepared and this efficient. That sequence became the microcosm of the entire game. One team executing at an elite level. One player trying to force something that wasn't there. One block leading to 1 bucket. One moment that defined the entire evening. When the final buzzer sounded and the game was officially over, the statistical sheet told a story that was impossible to ignore. Numbers don't lie. They don't care about narratives. They don't care about potential or hype or what anyone thought was going to happen. They just measure what actually occurred. And what occurred was a performance from Angel Reese that fell dramatically short of what the moment demanded. 11 points. 4 of 9 shooting. That's less than 45% from the field. In a game where she needed to be dominant, where she needed to be the catalyst for Atlanta's offense, where she needed to prove she belonged on the same stage as Caitlin Clark, she managed to get to double figures but barely. 11 points is not a statement. 11 points is not a declaration of arrival. 11 points is a player going through the motions. It's a player trying to contribute but ultimately becoming invisible when it mattered most. 4 of 9 from the field when she had all the advantages, spacing, smaller defenders, teammates trying to get her the ball in rhythm, is not acceptable at this level. But it gets worse. 4 turnovers. In a game that was already slipping away, in a game where Atlanta needed to take care of the basketball and execute offensively, Reese turned it over 4 times. 4 times she made decisions that helped Indiana more than they helped her own team. 4 times she put the ball in harm's way. 4 times she forced something that wasn't there. In a tight game, those turnovers are the difference. In a game where your team is already struggling, those turnovers are a death sentence. Each turnover is an opportunity for the other team to score in transition, to establish their rhythm, to build momentum. Reese gave Indiana 4 of those opportunities, and then there's the plus-minus. -8, when Angel Reese was on the floor, the Atlanta Dream were outscored by 8 points. 8. That's a significant margin over the course of a game. That's not a coincidence. That's not bad luck. That's a direct measurement of how much worse Atlanta was when their supposed star player was on the court. Her teammates were playing better when she was off the floor. The team's offense flowed better. The team's defense was more organized. Everything improved when Reese sat down. That's the kind of stat line that doesn't lie about your impact on a game. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's record against Reese improved to 5-1, 5 wins, 1 loss. In their professional matchups, which have already become must-watch television because of their national championship game history, Clark has completely dominated the head-to-head competition. 5 times out of 6, when these two have squared off in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark's team has won. 1 time out of 6, Angel Reese's team has won. That's not close. That's not a rivalry. That's a pattern of one player being significantly better prepared and more capable of handling the pressure of these moments. But the larger pattern here is even more important than individual statistics. The WNBA is evolving at a speed that's almost scary. The economics are demanding excellence now. The spotlight isn't forgiving anymore. Teams that are prepared, that have brilliant coaching, that have generational talent, they're thriving. Teams that aren't ready are getting exposed in real time on national television. There's no place to hide anymore. The level of play, the intensity, the strategic sophistication, it's all reached a point where you can't just show up and expect to win based on athleticism alone. Indiana has all 3 of those elements. They have a system that's coherent and effective. They have coaching that's operating at an elite level. And they have Caitlin Clark, a generational talent who seems to elevate when the pressure increases instead of shrinking from it. That combination is nearly unstoppable right now. Atlanta has potential. Reese has tremendous upside, but potential doesn't matter when the game is being played. Execution matters, preparation matters, mental toughness matters. And on this particular night, none of those things were present for the Atlanta Dream. The statistics reflect that reality perfectly. They tell the story of a team that wasn't ready, a player who couldn't handle the pressure, and a team that was completely outplayed when it mattered most. When the game ended, and the cameras were still rolling, when the crowd was still buzzing from what they'd just witnessed, the real moment came during the post-game interviews. This is where athletes sometimes let down their guard. This is where the competition is officially over and there's nothing left to prove on the court. This is where what they say can be just as important as what they did during the game. And Angel Reese said something that got people's attention. There's been significant buzz online about what exactly she admitted during that post-game interview. Fans and analysts have been speculating about the exact wording, about what she was really saying, about whether she was acknowledging something she didn't want to admit publicly, or whether she was being genuinely reflective about the game. The exact details have been debated in forums and on social media, with different people interpreting her words differently based on what they wanted to see. But here's what we know. Her admission was honest enough that it surprised people. Whether she explicitly said she felt the pressure was getting to her, whether she talked about not executing the way she had prepared to, whether she revealed something deeper about her confidence level, reports suggest her statement was candid in a way that suggested she understood what had happened. She wasn't making excuses. She wasn't blaming her teammates. She wasn't blaming the officials. She was taking responsibility. And that's something that not all players are willing to do. In the post-game presser, Reese opened up about the game in a way that suggested the spotlight had affected her more than she wanted to admit publicly. She talked about the preparation. She talked about what she thought was going to happen versus what actually happened. She talked about the adjustments that didn't work and the execution that fell short. It was clear from listening to her that she understood the gap between expectation and reality. It was clear that she recognized the level at which Indiana had played and the level at which she had fallen short. Whether she explicitly said the word choke, or whether she used more diplomatic language, the implication was clear. She acknowledged that this wasn't the performance she came to deliver. She acknowledged that when it mattered most, she didn't execute the way she needed to. She acknowledged that the pressure of the moment, the magnitude of the opponent, and the weight of expectation had combined to create a situation where she simply wasn't able to perform at the level the game demanded. What's fascinating is how raw that admission was. In modern sports, athletes are usually coached on what to say post-game. They're trained to hit certain talking points. They're reminded to stay positive. They're encouraged to deflect blame or emphasize the positive. But Reese seemed to bypass all of that. She seemed to genuinely reflect on what had happened and accept responsibility for her part in it. That takes a certain kind of maturity. That takes a certain kind of self-awareness. That takes courage to say out loud. The interview also revealed something about her mental state going forward. She seemed frustrated but not destroyed. She seemed disappointed but not broken. She seemed to understand that this was one game, one moment, but also that it was a moment that would define the narrative around her for a while. She seemed to understand that this loss, this performance, this admission would be part of her story from this point forward. But she also seemed determined that it wouldn't be the final chapter. What makes the post-game admission significant is that it tells us she's self-aware enough to understand what happened. She's not delusional. She's not making excuses. She's facing reality. And in some ways, that's more important than the actual game itself, because it suggests that she can learn from this. It suggests that she can use this as a learning experience. It suggests that she won't just move on to the next game without reflecting on what went wrong. But it also raises questions. If she understood what needed to happen, if she had prepared for this, if she knew what was coming, why did she still fall apart? Why did the preparation not translate into performance? Why did the mental aspect fail her in the moment? Those are the questions that will haunt her going forward. Those are the questions that will drive her either toward improvement or toward further decline. The post-game admission confirmed what the tape had already shown us. Angel Reese crumbled when the pressure peaked. And she knew it. The WNBA is evolving at a speed that demands excellence. The economics have changed. The expectations have risen. The spotlight exposes weakness like nothing else can. This game was a perfect example of that evolution. Two rookies, similar talent levels, completely different outcomes. One thrived under pressure. One crumbled. One executed a plan. One improvised and failed. One adjusted. One stayed the course. Angel Reese's post-game admission told us something important. She understands what happened. She knows she fell short. She knows she wasn't ready for this moment. But understanding and fixing are two different things. Going forward, the question isn't whether Reese can get better. Obviously she can. The question is whether she can adjust quickly enough to keep pace with how fast this league is moving. Caitlin Clark has proven she can. She's done it consistently. Reese needs to prove she can do the same. This game was a step backward. What happens next will define whether this becomes a pattern or a learning moment.